Not too long ago, we used to have a Department of Health, Education, and Welfare.
And one department.
One department. And it essentially, you know...
for the citizens of Indiana, so
right.
We didn't have to spend our wages at the bottom of the...
Well, no, what I was saying is that they used to have one in Washington.
Yeah.
So over the years, you've seen this erosion of the sovereignty to... essentially based on, you know, the taxing by the federal government that essentially has most of the money being distributed out of Washington. One of the things that I did last week, I joined with other attorneys general around the country in asking Congress to restore full funding of what's called the Byrne Grant. It's a topic that's near and dear to a lot of prosecutors in the 92 counties. But it's essentially a return of the money to Indiana that we need to protect citizens and these vital programs that the prosecutors, law enforcement, and the joint task forces that include the U.S. Attorney, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the Attorney General, and other law enforcement partners. So we got cut 67% last year. So one of the things that my colleagues and I, the other attorneys general, are focused on is trying to get the federal government to restore that Byrne Grant funding so that we can resume some of the programs that are pretty vital in this area.
Now, is that going to create new money?
Well, it's not a good time to be talking about new money in Washington unless you've part of the stimulus package, but frankly, this is just the return. Yeah, the return of what the states had used for protection programs, a lot of drug enforcement programs, things that are that cross all borders, that cross all divisions of government, and really it goes to that. The coordination between state, local, and federal officials.
Well, given those inefficiencies of the process of moving money to Washington and administering that big and then the returning fraction, I kind of continue to think that we don't really see any of our money return. It doesn't pay the interest on the national debt, not even close anymore. So it almost by default has to be new money. That we're talking about being returned to a people which has already sent their money into a black hole.
Well, you know, Indiana continues to be a donor state. You know, for every dollar that we send to Washington, the return on that dollar is, I think it's less than 80%. So even among programs, and the Byrne Grant program is one that's particularly, you know, my attention right now because we're seeking the restoration of these programs. But you're right, I mean, from the logical standpoint, to have people taxed at a local level by the federal government, have the money moved to Washington, only to be returned back in these programs is terribly inefficient. So I'm not going to argue that point. Frankly, if you look back at the history of this, it's harder for people to be taxed at a local level because people vote
against the taxes.
And they vote people out that are associated with the tax increase.
That's the way it's meant to be.
But it became easier to have the federal government, the Congress, you know, it has to start in the House of Representatives. So it's easier for them to get away with taxing and spending because they can always blame it on the other members. So I think that's what you see now.
It's called voluntary, right?
And the ideal, so with the Byrne program, the ideal thing would be to get rid of the federal programs that are being and return it to the states. So if we could at least, you're saying if we could at least get it started in the state, then we could maybe fight the federal government saying, look, we're already taking care of it here. Well, so then we'd have a little more leverage.
Not to be a devil's advocate here, but former State Attorney General Eliot Spitzer was about organizing states' attorneys generals concerning the subprime mortgage fiasco, and we know about his end. Do you have any concerns for those who've organized on the Byrne Grant?
You know, all attorneys general don't have exactly the same authority. In Indiana, a very conservative state, we're one of only 16 states that have a legislatively authorized Attorney General. So I don't have a constitutional structure for my office. Every time we want to act in the Office of the Attorney General, I ask the attorneys that bring a case to me to show me the statute that authorizes my office to act in this specific case. So I don't have some of the authority that some attorneys general have to, let's say, look into the Constitution and see a role that they can essentially, make up at some point because they're an independent creature of the Constitution. Mine is a very restrictive office and one that I take very seriously to only serve as much and as often and in the area of responsibility that the Indiana General Assembly has authorized. So,
on that note, as Attorney General, you talk to the other states that have the constitutional authority. Do you have an opinion on which one is more efficient for your job?
Well, I mean, it's true that there's only 16 that are structured the way Indiana has been structured.
And every other ones are constitutional?
They are. Well, some are appointed. I think New Jersey, Alaska. There's a number that are appointed by the governor. That's in the very minority. So it's 3 or 4 maybe. The 16 that are legislative creatures are considered more conservative. That the legislature wants the Attorney General to act to protect certain areas and not others. So the same authority that can be granted can be taken away. So it's a pretty conservative, restricted role. Frankly, I'm not going to make the argument currently that we need to have a constitutional office. There's others who might argue that, but I think I'm pretty comfortable with the role that I've been given. I work very closely with the legislature, so if I need additional authority, frankly, I've got 6 bills now that I'm asking for additional authority to serve in a specific role.
Can you raise the mic up to stand for us?
Sure.
See, that's why it's stupid politics, because we get away with telling you
You'd
your
think I'd
mic.
know where the mic goes.
We can get away with telling you your mic online, on
Quite all right.
camera.
That should help us in the game department on your mic.
So it's not even maybe that one's better or worse, it's just different.
It is different, and I think, you have to focus on what the role is and perform within that role.
Do you prefer one over the other, or?
It's almost an academic issue. I think if I were going to be the Attorney General in New York, they have a very broad area there, and the Attorney General plays that role because there's not other areas that can cover those responsibilities. They've got Wall Street sitting in the state of New York. Mm-hmm. So to have the role of securities enforcement is something that the state decided. Here, the Securities Commissioner is actually housed in the Secretary of State's office. So they've, picked and chosen where they think it's appropriate. We've got a history of it. From time to time, they do talk about these mergers. So you currently hear I think there's legislation that would merge the treasurer and the auditor. So those 2 positions are being considered to be merged.
Is that in the Kernan-Shepard?
It is, and it's actually a bill now before I think it's the Senate.
How much of the Kernan-Shepard report is in the form of bills at this point?
Well, the governor proposed a package that includes, I think I know of the first 16 that are part of it. So it was, considered a first step. That Shepard-Kernan is a long-term.
As far as your disposition of your assignment, do you actually take an oath to uphold and support the Constitution?
Absolutely.